In this video, we will dive into the movie Rush Hour 1998. We will discuss the movie story, summarize the plot, and explore the cast and characters. Additionally, we will cover the movie production details and box office performance. Finally, we will provide the review and personal reaction. So let's begin with the movie story. The movie is directed by Brett Ratner, produced by Roger Birnbaum, Jonathan Glickman, Arthur M. Sargsyan. Story by Ross Lamna. Written by Jim Cobb, Ross Lamna. Starring Jackie Chan, Chris Tucker, Tom Wilkinson, Chris Payne, Elizabeth Pena. Music by Lalo Schifrin. Cinematography by Adam Greenberg. Rush Hour is a 1998 American buddy action comedy film directed by Brett Ratner. It stars Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker. It was released on December 18, 1998. The Rush film has two sequels, Rush Hour 2 and Rush Hour 3. When a Chinese diplomat's daughter is kidnapped in Los Angeles, he calls in Hong Kong Detective Inspector Lee, played by Jackie Chan, to assist the FBI with the case. But the FBI doesn't want anything to do with Lee and they dump him off on the LAPD, who assign wisecracking Detective James Carter, Chris Tucker, to watch over him. Although Lee and Carter cannot stand each other, they choose to work together to solve the case on their own when they figure out they have been ditched by both the FBI and police. Cast: Jackie Chan as Detective Inspector Lee, Chris Tucker as Detective James Carter, Tom Wilkinson as James Griffin. Rush Hour 1998 movie review. Rush Hour is our reliable friend. One's a movie pairing two opposites. One's a legendary detective from Hong Kong and one's a Los Angeles cop, and one's a Chinese guy, and one's a black guy, and one's a martial arts expert, and one's a wisecracking showboat. Neither one's a original casting idea, but together they make an entertainment team. The movie teams up Jackie Chan, king of light-hearted action comedy, and Chris Tucker, who crosses Eddie Murphy with Chris Rock and comes up with the guy who, if you saw him a block away, you'd immediately start wondering how he was going to con you. There are comic possibilities even in their personal patterns. Chan is not known for his effortless command of English. Tucker is a motormouth. Chan's persona is modest and self-effacing, and Tucker plays a shameless sales promoter. The story: during the last days of Hong Kong's status as a British colony, super cop Chan busts up a smuggling ring, but the mastermind escapes to the United States. There they kidnap the daughter of the Chinese consul, who tells the FBI he wants Chan, a family friend, flown in to help with the investigation. Their fates wants nothing to do with the cop from overseas, and they also don't want the LAPD involved. So they get the idea of pairing up the Chinese guy and the LA cop so they can keep each other out of the way. At LA Police Headquarters, this idea is well received after the chief, the roundtable Cliff Baker Hall, realizes it's a way to get his most troublesome detective out of his hair. That would be Carter, played by Chris Tucker as the kind of loose cannon who roars around the streets in a vintage Corvette and works undercover in dangerous situations. Neither cop likes teamwork, both work best alone, but Chan doesn't know this way around LA, and Tucker needs to earn pants with his chief. That's enough to fool the lightweight screenplay by Jim Cobb and Ross Lamna, which contains a lot of Chanly funny lines and even a reference to Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles of Jackie Chan fame. Chan is of course noted for his stunts, which he performs himself without doubles. Rush Hour has a neat little example of his wall climbing ability and a breathtaking sequence in which he leaps from a double Dagger bus to an overhead traffic sign to a truck, and there's a scene in a high area where he falls from a beam and slides to safety down a silk streamer. It's useful to point out, I suppose, that although Chain does his own stunts, they are indeed stunts and not death-defying risk. He does what a stuntman would do, but with the same safeguard and deceptive camera angle. He is brave, agile, and inventive, but not foolish. I like the way the plot handles Zhang, the conscious young daughter. Instead of being treated like a helpless pawn, she is portrayed as one of Jackie's little martial arts students in Hong Kong. Have you been practicing your eye goggles? And when the kidnappers try to carry her off, she causes them no end of trouble. I also like the way Chris Tucker, who was funny in Monkey talks his way into and out of situations using a distracting stream of dialogue while he figures out what to do next. Rush Hour is lightweight and made out of family's elements, but they have handled with humor and invention, and the Bonza formula can seem fresh if the characters are both couple of engaging performers. Footnote: all Jackie Chan movies end with outtakes which usually show him missing on stunts and breathing bones extra. This time the emphasis is mostly on bloopers where he and Tucker blow their lines. I liked the missed stunts better. It's not that I enjoy seeing Jackie waving bravely from the scratch as they wheel him into the ambulance, but that there's a tradition involved. To be sure, with the two major stunts in the movie, any mistake could have been his last. Rush Hour 1998. I have seen this movie countless times. It was always airing on some or other channel when I was growing up. It's a really enjoyable movie, but as with a lot of comedies, some of its themes just have not aged well. That being said, it's still one of my favorite buddy cop movies and a movie I'll probably watch countless times more. Okay, basic plot: Detective Inspector Lee is a member of the Royal Hong Kong police force who is asked to come to Los Angeles to solve the kidnapping of a Chinese diplomat's girl. The FBI see Lee as nothing but an unwanted tourist and assign him a babysitter to keep him busy and out of trouble. Detective James Carter from the LAPD. Initially hostile to each other, the two men overcome their differences and band together to solve the case themselves. I think a good buddy cop movie has to have three essential elements: two lead characters with opposing styles, temperaments that are forced to work together, a high profile case that they are thrown off, a big bad who is played by a semi well known actor. Rush Hour has all three obviously, but the thing that makes the movie work so well is the chemistry between Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker. The only thing faster than Chan's punches and kicks has to be Tucker's mouth. Individually, they both offer so much entertainment and genial laughs, but together they are an absolute thwart. It's a comedy too made in heaven. It's a spawned a trilogy and a TV show that I will never watch. Now, while a lot of this movie's humor is founded in the contrast between the clash of cultures of Tucker and Chan's characters, the some way of the jokes are presented in problematic at best and straight out racist and misogynistic at worst. You could argue that the jokes present the mindset of society at that time and therefore will not be as politely contract as comedy is forced to be in the modern era. It's not promoting discrimination, it's just displaying it. Either way, certain elements of the movie has not aged, but thankfully these kind of jokes are in the minority. The comedy flaws through Jackie Chan's remarkable stunts work and Chris Tucker's ability to talk himself out of but also often into trouble. The movie just extends over what seems to be that mandatory 90-minute runtime that all movies in the 90s had to adhere to. In a movie like this, that runtime is more than sufficient to present its story. The film is well paced and the action pops up in rhythmic in travel that ensures things never get boring. Its plus is a big formulaic and the big twist about who the big bad behind the criminal organization is so obvious that a toddler could figure it out. It's always the rich white man, especially if he's British. Overall, Rush Hour has some problematic elements, but being a 90s comedy, it's almost unavoidable. The movie works so well because of the star power and charisma of its two leads. Its action is fun, and overall, it's a fun way to spend an hour and a half. Definitely worth watching. Rush Hour 1998 trilogy reviewed. If you ask me who my favorite actor was as a kid, I'd easily say Jackie Chan. The man has the physicality and charisma to excel in practical any role you could throw at him. From the wisecracking martial art master in Legend of Drunken Boxing or the Forbidden Kingdom to the statement cop in movies like Rush Hour. But what separated him from many other actors was the fact that he always did his own stunts take after take, no matter how imposing they were. In my opinion, setting a gold standard for what an action star should be, and all of this is on full display, is one of my favorite childhood trilogies, Rush Hour. Directed by Brett Ratner, the Rush Hour trilogy revolves around the antics of Hong Kong detective Inspector Lee, played by Jackie Chan, and LAPD officer James Carter, played by Chris Tucker. After the kidnapping of Chinese consul Han's daughter Su Zhang, Han has Inspector Lee flown from China to the US, but not wanting an outsider interfere with their case. The FBI asks the LAPD to send Carter to distract Lee. Despite his best efforts, Lee manages to arrive at the Chinese consul, and he and Carter are forced to work together to find Su Zhang. Even though the two had strikingly different personalities, Lee and Carter eventually succeed and become friends by the film's end. Although Rush Hour has distributed by New Line Cinema, the script was actually sold to a Disney division. The chair of Disney expresses skepticism over Chinese appeal to a Western audience, yet Ratner insists on keeping him. As for the lore of James Carter, there were multiple actor considered, including Eddie Murphy, Chris Rock, and Wesley Snipes, but Ratner ultimately gave the part to Chris Tucker after seeing him in Monkey Talks and thought he and Jane would have good chemistry. This decision was a perfect one, as Rush Hour not only made around 244 million worldwide on a budget of 34 million, but also was responsible for kickstarting the aggregate review site Rotten Tomatoes. This success could only mean one thing: sequel time, but this is where things started heading south. The second film takes place almost directly after the first one left off. Lee and Carter are on a vacation in Hong Kong, custody of Consul Han. While on vacation, Lee takes up a case to stop the Chinese tides after the US embassy is bombed. After a scuffle with the Trades and their second in command, Lee tells Carter the real reason why he took up the case. The leader of the triad is Ricky Tan, his father's former partner in the police department. Soon after the Huli bomb the Hong Kong, PD Lee presumes Carter is dead and moves to take Ricky Tan down once and for all. Meanwhile, Carter finds out the case is much bigger than he thought, and the US Secret Service get involved. I will not lie when I say this was my favorite of the three films as a kid. The change of scenery from LA to Hong Kong was a pleasant additional, and seeing the Eastern authentic in the Red Dragon Casino in Vegas was just a cherry on top. Plus, we even has an Asian lead have a shot at romance, something that was very rare at the time, yet upon multiple revisits I could not help but feel something was off. Despite going through an entire character arc together and even disclosing a personal story about his father, Lee somehow doesn't initially tell Carter that he took up the case. Carter finds out after the two get into short shit with the Trot. Why would not he tell him, despite that it's actually not the most egregious issue I have with the film? The writing this time around has gotten a bit worse, especially the racial humor, whilst it makes sense in the first film to highlight Carter and Lee's initial animosity. By the films, and Carter makes an effort to learn basic Chinese as a sign of respect to Lee, but here he makes racist remark after remark. I swear having Chen on board is almost the film's way of giving the green light to these jokes. Additionally, the film's statement of women is far crasser as this sequel. Every woman exists for either the sole player of the male cast or to be the butt of some sexual charge, joke, or remark. Considering this is a Brett Ratner production, I should not be surprised. But it could be worse. It could feature a cameo by Roman Polanski making sexual assault jokes and have women strip in front of a soulless Caesar. Oh wait, what happened in Rush Hour 3? Alright, I'll cut to case. Unlike the first two films that came out only a few years apart from each other, Rush Hour 3 was released in 2007, 6 years after the second film. Why was this made so long after the second film? I have no idea. As for the story, Rush Hour 3 is essentially the same as its predecessors, with only a change in location and the introduction of another person from Lee's past, his brother Kinji, who served as the movie's bad guy. Now this seems nice and all, but there's just one problem. This plot has been done nearly beat for beat in Rush Hour 2. The movie tries to come full circle by featuring both Han, now an ambassador, and Su Zhang. However, Rush Hour 3 is set only 3 years after the events of the first one, and Su Zhang was only 10 years old, but there she is 20. Does she have accelerated aging like the clone troopers from Star Wars? Now, you may be asking why I didn't include them in the synopsis. That's because they are so irrelevant they just disappear from the majority of the film. Han gets shot early on and remains in a hospital. Meanwhile, Su Zhang only exists to get kidnapped again, and just when you think she'll have a bit of relevance to the plot, she gets shoved into an elevator by Lee and disappears for the rest of the film. I understand Lee did it for her safety, but it would not be nice if she got some kind of closure for her and Ambassador Han. But no, the movie literally ends with Lee and Carter dancing off into the distance to the song War by Edwin Starr. Rush Hour 1998 was the first movie of the James Carter and Jackie Chan as Lee. Considering the movie and his recent surge in American popularity, it was all but inevitable that Jackie Chan would eventually show up in a big budget Hollywood action picture. He has not been in one since he did the Cannibal Run films back in the early 80s. That production in Rush Hour, a somewhat lackluster cop party movie that goes wrong in two big ways. It fails to utilize Chan's full range of skills, relegating him to the role of a kickboxing action hero and virtually ignoring his comedic aptitude. And it saddles him with a partner played by the irritating Chris Tucker. In his Hong Kong features, Chan almost always delights, sometimes is spite of the plot, because he is given an opportunity to display his versatility. His performances are not just about action, they are so much about comic timing as they are about stunts and death-defying feats. That's the reason why he is more often compared to Kaplan and Keaton than to Bruce Lee. Unfortunately, filmmaker Brett Ratner, who directed Tucker in Monkey Talks, doesn't seem to understand a large part of Chan's appeal. In Rush Hour, the actor is relegated to participating in various uninspired action sequences that could have just as easily been executed by Chuck Norris. Chan is rarely offered the opportunity to let his charisma shine through. 90% of the comedy is left to Tucker, who, when wound up, can be as aggravating as fingernails and on a blackboard. The storyline is as silly as one might expect for a movie that does not want its viewing thinking too much about plot or characterization. It's designed as a framework for the action sequence, all of which are in dire need of an underline injection. Jane plays Liz, a Hong Kong police inspector who has been brought to America to aid in a kidnapping investigation. Su Zhang, the daughter of the Chinese consul in the United States and one of Lee's former charges, is taken hostage by a gangster who is demanding a $50 million ransom to return her alive. The FBI, led by the usual pair of incompetence, doesn't appreciate Lee's involvement, so they recruit James Carter, a LAPD cop, to babysit him during his time in America. Soon Lee and Carter, who don't really get along, are trying to solve the crime on their own. If it sounds like the Lethal Weapon formula, it is, but Rush Hour is not close to being as entertainment. Some people think Chris Tucker is funny, but I have yet to laugh at one of his out of control performances. He is too loud and abrasive, and he seems to think that acting, weird, and shouting are among the necessary attributes of a comedian. I feel the same way about Robin Williams and Jim Carrey. They're a lot more effective when they are under control. Unfortunately, in Rush Hour, Tucker is allowed to do pretty much when he wants, and he ends up interfering with Jan's few attempts at subtle humor. Tucker may be perfect for a loud, brash action film, but his presence here effectively undermines Jan's work. There are times when Rush Hour shows potential, but these instances are more of a tease than anything else. On one occasion, Jan leaps into the air from a moving bus to grab an overheard sign after dangling in midair for a few seconds. He drops onto the top of a truck. There's an amusing bit with Jan and Tucker struggling with stuff to the tune of war, and in the kidnapping victim, it's refreshing to see a little girl who has spunk but is not a brat. Everyone familiar with Jan's movies should be aware that he uses the end credit to show a variety of often bone-cranking outtakes. For Rush Hours, these are other lame, showing more flush lines than stunts gone awry. That more than anything is indicative of how little Jan's potential is realized in this movie. Not that he wants to see him getting hurt, but he is given so little to do that he never really has the chance. There's a little doubt that Rush Hour is trying to be a success at the box office, and given audience love of sequels, Rush Hour 2 is probably already in the planning stage. Let's hope that next time around, the director uses lead actor as something more than Tucker's straight man. On this occasion, as Jane moved from Hong Kong to Hollywood, something got lost in the translation. Rush Hour United States 1998, directed by Brett Ratner, cast as Jackie Chan, Chris Tucker, Tom Wilkinson, Elizabeth Pena, screenplay by Jim Goff, cinematography Adam Greenberg, US distributor New Line Cinema. We can thank Jackie Chan and Rush Hour for Rotten Tomatoes. 1998 was a fascinating year in popular culture. Furbies were taking over the world. Sinfield was airing its final season, and Jackie Chan was planting the seeds for what was to become his breakout Hollywood picture, Rush Hour. Chan was already a big star in Asia and Europe with hits like Drunken Master, Police Story, and Armor of God. A worldwide release of Rumble in the Bronx in 1995 opened the Western world's eyes to the martial art phenomenon, and filmmaker Brett Ratner wanted to bring him to the forefront of a film that would showcase his talents. Little did he know that the picture would also indirectly be responsible for influencing a new age in the appreciation of movies. Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker didn't think they had chemistry. Brett Ratner clearly has a vision in mind regarding the screenplay written by Ross Limana, and he has dead set on casting Chan as Chief Inspector Lee. The filmmaker flew to South Africa where the actor was filming Who Am I personally coached Chen into starring in this project. They had lunch and the filmmaker dined, drank and smoked cigarette and Jackie Ratner, who didn't drink or smoke, acid to the actor's offer and pitched his idea. Chan drove him to the airport and a few days later called him to confirm his participation. Not long after that, Jackie flew to Los Angeles to meet his partner in the film, Chris Tucker. It was, as the film's tagline succinctly puts it, a meeting where the fastest hand in the East meet the biggest mouth in the West. While Tucker was absolutely ecstatic to meet Jackie Chan, they had reservations about a possible working relationship based on their first impressions of each other. Tucker pulled Ratner aside and questions how the movie was going to work since Chan didn't really understand much English. Chan, on the other hand, mentioned to Ratner that he likes Chris but he cannot understand the way he talks. Usually, this would be the genesis of a project's downfall. How can two people who cannot understand each other be able to shoot, let alone finish a film together? Ratner took his as a perfect storm. The director himself states that his conclusion would exact every single but after constructing personalities to cinematic perfection. The initial conversation between Chan and Tucker went on to become the inspiration for the most iconic line in the picture. Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? And exactly what should define what makes this hilarious dynamic work. Rush Hour runs a fairly simple story. During the last day of British occupation in Hong Kong, Lee leads a raid of a port where he hopes to finally lock up Juntao, an elusive crime boss. He recovers several Chinese artifacts from the scene and presents them to a Chinese consul Han and police commander Thomas Griffin. After a few months, Zhang, the daughter of Consul Han, who now works in Los Angeles, is kidnapped. He enlists the help of his trusted Chief Inspector Lee to help him. The FBI intervenes and to avoid an international incident, they ask the LAPD to provide someone to keep Lee at bay, and James Carter is giving the assignment. The two are enveloped in a string of events where they eventually find out the Griffin is actually Chunato, fool his grand plan of taking all the Chinese treasure for himself and successfully retrieves Zhang. From a critical standpoint, there is not anything relatively about Rush Hour and its antics. There have been a plethora of buddy cop comedies in the past, all of which has been made to tackle the funny bonds. However, it was the first time most Western audiences had been able to get a glimpse of Chan in a Hollywood production. For those who were not deep into the already established filmography of Jackie Chan, this was a fresh look into an already hashed formula and partnered with the loudmouth style of Chris Tucker. It set the box office on fire. Rush Hour grossed over $140 million, becoming the seventh biggest movie of 1998 and started a series of movies that would go on to generate more than $800 million in ticket sale. It was a worldwide phenomenon and put Chan on a level he has not come down from since. Chan successfully captured the attention of moviegoers all over the globe, and one in particular was so entertained by it that he started the most popular film review aggregated site on the internet. A fan of Jackie Chan invented Rotten Tomatoes. Zhang was a big Jackie Chan fan and was excited of learn of Rush Hour and its nearing release. Excited about the film, he wanted to reinvigorate his fandom by looking for reviews of Chan's work on the internet. Unfortunately, Sins could not find much of them during the summer of 1998 and decided to build a fan page devoted to covering his works and update on Rush Hour. However, when the release of the film was delayed, he was stuck at a roadblock. What would happen to his project and what would he do his spare time until the movie was finally in theaters? He saw a rare gap in the internet's fields of information and decided to aggregate different reviews for other movies to be released. With Nail Reviews, Your Friends and Neighbor becoming his first way to launch co-founder Stephen Wang then shares that she went on to formulate the stranger aspects of Rotten Tomatoes, such as the Tomatometer Fresh and Rotten classification for its reviews and the Rotten Tomatoes name. Fandom does have its inherited wonder, and the appreciation Sin had for Jackie Chan built a venue where others could also appreciate and share their input on the films they love. Rush Hour is unapologetic with its humor, but it's reductive to think of the film as that matter alone. There are magnificent start sequences where Chan shows inhuman athleticism, and it gave him an avenue to magnify his endearing charisma. Arguably, this is also Chris Tucker's best work, partly due to the trailer-made dynamic he and Jane have rallied as a comedic duo, bring so much diversity to the table in terms of their abilities, and when the two stars share the screen, it becomes a melting pot of two vastly different cultures, resulting in an alphabet soup of hilarity. Rush Hour may be dated for some, but its influence will forever reverberate as long as Rotten Tomatoes is here. Rush Hour 1998 is an action comedy and buddy film starring Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan. Here's the premise: when a Chinese diplomat's daughter is kidnapped in Los Angeles, he calls in a Hong Kong detective Inspector Lee to assist the FBI with the case. But the FBI doesn't want anything to do with Lee, and they dumped him off on the LAPD, who assigned wisecracking detective James Carter to watch over him. Although Lee and Carter cannot stand each other, they choose to work together to solve the case on their own when they figure out they have been ditched by both the FBI and the police. It's been a long time since I first watched Rush Hour, but the movie held up well as anything an action adventure comedy needs to be. Rush Hour is funny and I enjoyed it, but the purpose of my reviews is to provide teachable moments about the FBI and its law enforcement partners. While watching Rush Hour, I found a new topics to explore. In the movie, when the Chinese diplomat's young daughter is kidnapped, I wondered who is responsible for providing security to foreign diplomats and their family members. I didn't know, so I googled it and discovered the United States Department of State's Bureau of Diplomatic Security Office of Foreign Missions is responsible for the protection of foreign embassies and consulates on US soil. Since DSS does not have a true uniform force with police powers, other agencies or local police department are reimbursed for providing this service. Two notable are the Secret Service Uniform Division in Washington, D.C. and the New York City Police Department (NYPD). Info from the Bureau of Diplomatic Security website. Since Rush Hour takes place in Los Angeles, I wonder if in real life the Los Angeles Police Department LAPD on behalf of the DSS protect foreign consulates and embassies located there. If you know, send me documentation and I'll update it. I analyzed the FBI response to the kidnapping and depicted in Rush Hour. As far as police and pastoral accuracy, it was expect for the lack of direct participation by the LAPD. The assignment given to LAPD Directive James Carter to watch Hong Kong Detective Inspector Lee doesn't count. With the kidnapping of a child under the age of 18, the local police would immediately invite the FBI to be involved in the kidnapping abduction investigation. There does not have to be a ransom demand, the child does not have to cross the state lines or be missing for 24 hours. And those scenes with agent embedded in the home of the Chinese diplomat, working closely with him to assess who he has been in contact with, and monitoring phone calls and activities, they are good. That's how it works for real, but maybe not so many agents. Rush Hour takes place in 1998, but today the FBI would activate the Child Abduction Rapid Diplomatic Team. CART team are experienced and highly trained FBI field office agents available for rapid deployment to asset state, local, tribal, and campus law enforcement partner with investigations during fast-moving, recently occurring child abduction matters. CARD teams can quickly establish on a site command post to countersize investigative efforts and operations. Info from FBI website. Learn more about how the FBI investigated child kidnapping cases in these FBI retired case file. Rush Hour 1998. After 15 years of trying, Jackie Chan finally broke into the US market with Rumble in the Bronx and Jackie Chan's First Strike. But it was not until Rush Hour that he really connected with mainstream American audiences. The earlier two films was essentially camp shop soggies packed for Westerners, but Rush Hour, with its high production values and lethal weapon style cop buddy formula, is poor Hollywood formula movie making, pairing Jackie with the unlike his partner abusive comic Chris Tucker. The theory seems to have been that Tucker money talks the fifth element, whose fast-paced, high-pitched chatter sounds like an Eddie Murphy record played at 78 RPM would compensate for Jackie's so-so English. Rush Hour was the first film in which Jackie worked up the courage to deliver his lines in English, as opposed to dubbing into English afterwards from a script. Tucker's self aggrandizing attitude and outrageous banter made an obvious contrast for Jackie Chan's effacing all business super cop, and it was hoped that the clash of Hong Kong and the Hood might somehow create something new and fresh. Well, it was not new, but it was reasonably fresh. Certainly, Jackie and Tucker each seems to be enjoying themselves, and audience responded enthusiastically to their ad couple scenery. There was a lot, of course, a hanky travel to involving kidnapping and a collection of priceless Chinese artifacts, but it gave the stars plenty of room to mug and groove to explore the aesthetic wars of urban pool halls and Chinese talk-out giants to argue over the merit of the Beach Boys and the lyrics to Edwin Starr's Vietnam-era anthem war. The setup: Jackie plays Inspector Lee and Inspector Hero Cop with the Hong Kong police. Tucker plays Detective Carter, a disgraced movie rig of the LAPD. Although opposite in practically every way, the two have one thing in common. Like all stars of buddy films, they prefer to work alone. What brings them together, albeit indirectly, is the kidnapping of the daughter of the Chinese consul to the United States. Lee is a personal friend of the consul and his daughter, and the consul insists on having Lee flown to the States to assist the FBI in the investigation. That's when the FBI contacts the LAPD and brings in Carter, not to assist in the investigation, as Carter originally thinks, but to keep Lee occupied and away from the case. This leads to a clever string of scenes in which Carter tries to keep track of Lee while Lee tries to get to the Chinese embassy. A brief stunt sequence involving a number of vehicles and a street sign is less energetic than a typical Jackie Chan stunt, but stands out for its exceptionally effortless grace. Then there's a funny bit where Carter and Lee draw guns on the other, leading up to an unexpected visual punchline. Finally, Carter actually handcuffs Lee to his steering wheel, which does slow Lee down, but not nearly as much as it does Carter. Eventually, of course, Lee and Carter must learn to work together, respecting one another's methods and abilities. Blah blah. Along the way, they get some help from a female Hispanic bomb squad trainee, whose introduction into the story guaranteed that before all is said and done, there will be a bomb that needs deactivating. Along the way, of course, there are more action scenes, brawls in pool halls and Chinese restaurants, and a climatic showdown in an exhibition hall where Jackie must first try to beat up bad guys while protecting priceless Chinese artifacts before executing a grand final stunt as broadly conceived as anything he has ever done. Rush Hour's main weakness in its masculation is applying its star assets for some reasons. Director Brett Ratner saw fit to rob in Jackie's action scenes to short bursts of a minute or less. That's like hiring virtue violist Yuzuma and rationing him no more than a single sheet of music at a time. The film first scene gives Jackie more room to do what he does than anything else in the rest of the movie. What's more, Ratner doesn't know how to shoot Jackie. Yes, many martial art movies use lots of close-up and rapid cuts because they are trying to make an ordinary actor, say Keanu Reeves, looks as good as Jackie Chan. When you are really shooting Jackie Chan, you cool it and let the audience get a good look. But while Jackie is held back, Tucker is given free rein to be as over the top as he wants, which is sometimes funny but more often merely crude and annoying. Tucker had some good martial. I cracked up when he remarked on the Lake of Prestige as the LAPD were the most hated police force in the whole free world. My own mama ashamed of me. She tells everybody I am a drug dealer. But then jokes, flat, fall, and not everyone will be amused by his soul mouth or by his constant slugs against Lee. Another aspect that may be troubling to some viewers is the kidnapping plot itself, which begins with an ambush scene in which a driver is shot and the consoled daughter is snatched onto a motorcycle and carried off, and ends with a tense standoff in which the girl has been blindfolded and strapped into a vest wired and explosives that can be detonated by remote control. It was partly these elements described as nasty manic to a child by the US Bishop Office for Film and Broadcasting in their reviews of the film. They earned the film a morally offensive classification from the body. At the same time, it's worth noting that the movie does try to soften his aspects by making Hasu a fisty little thing who resists her kidnappers and later joins Carter in shooting defiance mockery at the villain even while wearing the explosive vest. Different people will have different tolerance levels of this sort of things. All things considered for a typical American moviegoers who likes action movies and knows nothing but Jackie Chan, Rush Hour probably is not a bad place to start. It goes down easily enough, and afterwards, if you decide you like what Jackie does and want to see more, you can look into other films like Jackie Chan First Strikes and Operation Condor. Does not consider renting the Legend of Drunken Masters. You are not ready. How old Chris Tucker was when he made the Rush Hour movies. Chris Tucker is one of the stars of the Rush Hour trilogy, and here's how old he was throughout the three movies. Chris Tucker stars alongside Jackie Chan in the hilarious buddy-up comedies, with Chris Tucker's performance in the series being one of his career-defining roles. Chris Tucker has had a long and successful career, but the actor was surprisingly young in the Rush Hour movies. Rush Hour sees Chris Tucker play Detective James Carter, an LAPD officer that is tasked with locating the kidnapped daughter of Chinese consul Solon Han. However, at the request of Han, Carter has to work alongside Jackie Chan's Detective Inspector Lee, with the two putting head on all kind of adventure throughout the trilogy. Despite the original trilogy ending after Rush Hour 3 in 2007, Rush Hour 4 is in early development with the project finally moving along. However, there are no directors or writer currently attached to the project, leaving the film up in the air. Chris Tucker was 26 in Rush Hour. The first Rush Hour movie came out in 1998, meaning that Chris Tucker was only 26 when the comedy was being filmed. This is pretty young for a leading role in a movie like Rush Hour, with him starring alongside Jackie Chan, who was 44 years old. By the time the film was released, Tucker turned 27, with the first Rush Hour being a great early entry in the comedian's successful career. How old was Chris Tucker in Rush Hour 2? Due to the success of Rush Hour 2 was quickly greenlit, with the film releasing only a few years later. Rush Hour 2 came out in 2001, with Chris Tucker being 29 during the film's production and turning 30 less than a month after the film's release. Although not as critically acclaimed as the first film, Rush Hour 2 was another big commercial success, with Chris Tucker's performance and star power being a major factor in the movie's reception. How old was Chris Tucker when the Rush Hour trilogy ended? The Rush Hour trilogy ended with the release of Rush Hour 3 in 2007, with the franchise leading man aging several years in the long gap between the sequels. Chris Tucker was around 36 while filming Rush Hour 3, with the movie coming out more weeks before his birthday. Chris Tucker aged over a decade through the Rush Hour trilogy, but he managed to keep his iconic energy going throughout the series. However, Rush Hour 3 may not be the true end of Chris Tucker's involvement with the series, with a fourth Rush Hour movie potentially coming soon. Rush Hour 1998 buddy cop movies are one of the few genres that can be made over and over again with the same basic premise, and no one ever minds. Rush Hour doesn't break any new ground, but Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan have an unmatchable chemistry that makes it nearly impossible not to love his movie. Each lead has a scene in the beginning by himself showing his life before he meets the other. It's entertaining, but what it really does is prove how much better they are together. The story takes off when a Chinese diplomat's daughter is kidnapped by a crime lord in Los Angeles. He employs Hong Kong best detective Lee to help solve the case. The problem is the FBI doesn't want Lee involved, so they assign an LA cop, Detective Carter, to essentially babysit him. Carter is the laughingstock of his department because he is always bragging about himself with little evidence to back it up. Lee and Carter don't get along at first, which adds to the humor. The two come from opposite worlds as they find ways to bond, whether it's how neither of them are wanted for this case or how each of their fathers died in the line of duty. Rush Hour has all makings of a corny 90s action film. The glitches, musical scores, backs up, and even serial of events, but the humor is naturally hilarious and the story doesn't become more complex than it needs to be. So we can see past its flaws. Over 20 years later, it holds up better than almost any comedy from the decade. Jackie Chan's 849 million action comedy trilogy gets a new streaming home. The buddy cop genre was extremely popular in the 90s, with several films making a huge splash at the box office. Fans can revisit the fun-filled action when Jackie Chan's Rush Hour movies hit Netflix in 2025. Released in 1998, the first Rush Hour movie was directed by Brett Ratner from a script by Jim Koff and Rose Lamana. The story follows a pair of mismatched police officers who reluctantly team up to rescue the Chinese consul kidnapped daughter. Along the way, Hong Kong's Chief Inspector Lee and the LAPD's Detective James Carter fool the plans of dangerous international crime lord whose identity comes as a shock to everyone. The movie was a massive hit due to the chemistry between Chan's slightly reversed martial artist and Tucker's fast talking. Overconfidence. While glowing movie from critics, the film earned over 244 million at the global box office. Its success led to Rush Hour 2, which was released in 2001. This time, the story follows Lee and Carter on vacation in Hong Kong. But things go sideways when a bomb goes off the US Embassy, with tried crime lord Ricky Tan Mark as the prime suspect. While the sequel doubled down on the action and cultural slashes, reviews were mixed as critics felt that the story was lacking. Despite the lukewarm reception, the movie was a commercial success with 347 million in global ticket takings. A third film in the franchise was released in 2007. Rush Hour 3 begins as attempted assassinations on Ambassador Han takes Lee and Carter to Paris, where a French woman with knowledge of the trials needs protecting. Rush Hour 4 could be in the works. Rush Hour 3 receives the weakest review of the trilogy, with critics slamming its adaptive formula and lack of innovation. While the film still made a profit on its $140 million budget, It only earned 258 million at the global box office, which was a major drop compared to the preceding installments. Rush Hour 4 is reportedly being pitched to several studios with Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan willing to reprise their roles. In July, executives at Lionsgate were said to have met to discuss the project along the success of other legacy franchises. However, the problem with getting the action comedy off the ground is the potential involvement of Ratner, who was accused of sexual misconduct in 2017. Although the filmmaker has denied the claim as was not charged for the alleged crime, he stopped away from the industry after being dropped by his agency. Additionally, while Tucker and Chan have been in talks about a fourth Rush Hour movie, they have not officially signed on. Although the actors have been rather quiet about the project, Chan mentioned a fourth movie during an appearance at the Red Sea International Film Festival in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia in December 2022. "We are talking about Rush Hour 4 right now," he said simply. All three Rush Hour movies will be available to stream on Netflix on January 1, 2025. Netflix users cannot stop watching this Jackie Chan action trilogy. A classic Jackie Chan film franchise is proving to be very successful on Netflix. All three Rush Hour films are in Netflix top 10 chart for the week. According to Flix Patrol, the original Rush Hour film from 1998 is the top performing film in the trilogy at the 4th spot on Netflix top 10 in the United States chart. Rush Hour 2 and 3 hold spots 7 and 9 respectively. The successful body cop comedy films saw Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker in leading roles as police detectives who go on an adventure taking down corrupt crime figures in both Hong Kong and Los Angeles. Other movies currently in Netflix top 10 include The Age of Adeline starring Blake Lively, Horizon, An American Saga Chapter 1, Hotel Transylvania, 2, Due Date, Despicable Me 2, and Ad Vitam. Rush Hour was released in 1998 to positive reviews from critics and ended up crossing an impressive $244 million worldwide. The success of the film led to its two sequels, both of which went on to outperform it. Rush Hour 2 became the highest grossing film in the franchise, making $347 million at the box office. Rush Hour 3 grossed $258 million worldwide. Despite the box office revenue of the two sequels, neither of Rush Hour's follow-up films managed to earn the critical acclaim of the first entry in the franchise. Rush Hour 2 receives generally mixed reviews and has a 51% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Rush Hour 3 was the worst received film in the trilogy. Slated as nothing more than a rehash of earlier films, it holds a 17% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. The first film in the franchise has remained the highest rated with the 62% Rotten Tomato. Jackie Chan returning to another popular martial arts franchise in 2025. Jackie Chan is set to reprise his role in another one of the legendary martial arts films franchise later this year. Chan will star in Karate Kid's Legend, the sixth film in the Karate Kid franchise, which takes place 3 years after the events of Cobra Kai final season. Chan will once again play the role of the martial arts mentor Mr. Han. Karate Kid Legends introduced Ben Wong as the film's new main lead, Li Fong. The young student will be trained by both Mr. Han and Daniel LaRusso, Mr. Miyagi's student in the original 1984 film. According to the upcoming karate film, director Chan was actively involved in the film's creation, offering his input. Jackie Chan is the movie star, and that is something that you don't see so much anymore. Jonathan Anvistel said, "He had the ability to come up with a teeny idea that I'd never thought of, and all of Jackie's teeny ideas are in the movie." Karate Kid Legends is set to be released in theater on May 30, 2025. Brings delight. Why Rush Hour is my feels good movie. There's many a time in the grocery store or CVS when Fancy by Mariah Carey comes on and all I think of is Rush Hour. It's 1997 and it's the backseat of a car the Chinese consult daughter Su Zhang, played by an 11 years old Julia House of Bells Sweetie Fancy in the only way a Mariah songs can be belted. A stone-faced bodyguards in front of waiting throughout Los Angeles traffic to 10 years old me who sang about heartbreak and desire with similar vigor in front of her immigrant parents. It was a quintessentially American moment. There's a poor joy in Suzhang's face before we cut to the scene as large as the car is directed to the side. A police car swims in front of them, and a man gets out, unflinchingly shoots the bodyguards, and abducts Su Zhang. And thus the crux of the plot in this 1998 action comedy is set in motion for the rescue important person's daughter mission the director Brett Ratner offers as the Hong Kong actor Jackie Chan, who by then had gained some US recognition for Rumble in the Bronx, and Chris Tucker, who was already known for House Party 3 and Friday to Save the Day. Chan plays Chief Inspector Lee, a stateless detective from Hong Kong coming to the US for the first time to find his friend, the consultant's daughter, while Tucker is James Carter, a black officer who scarce throws smooth talks and has ambitions beyond the LAPD, the most hated cops in all the free world. My own mama's ashamed of me, says Carter. Each man meets the other with pronunciation. Carter speaks loudly in hopes it will make Lee better understand English as Lee looks at him with a slender smile. Assuming the American is all talk and no follow-up, each one believes he is the right person to solve this case, be it through personal ties or street smarts. The two valid stereotypes at each other throughout the film, which if I were not for the fact that sometimes feel-good movie imprints on you at young age, might feel worrisome to watch now, but Lee and Carter unknowingly become a charming underdog due sidestepping FBI agents on the case who throw their own self-importance streams the two on a nonsense. They tumble around Los Angeles from a poker game at a bar to an abandoned building that detonates and a Fu Chow restaurant in Chinatown towards Su Zhang's captures led by Zhang, the hand underling who makes a perfect and chilling second-in-charge villain. With a bleach pond-shaped head, lucky body, and a scar from Su Zhang whispering her necklace under one of his eyes during her kidnapping. Zhang brings the journey of just having finished a cigarette before crushing a body with one foot. Despite his generally frosty disposition, at one point he put a gun in front of Lee's home he's encountered before in Hong Kong. With barely controlled rage, the underlying just under his skin teeming with desire to unleashed. As Lee and Carter starts to uncover Lee's together and back up other up during brawls and then self detached when the duration become more of an extension of familiarities and friendship. Their lines, my cousin and I grabbed as kids when we were admittedly barely understood. I am Michael Jackson, you are Tito, I would scream at him during a game of handball. When the two fight Sans Hitchman, they lock up into a martial arts combination that resembles an elaborate bro handshake as they eat eel and camel's hump. They trade stories about their cop father heroes in their eyes. Here Rush Hour traps into something that stirred my heart then and now, and each settled into the two actors Jane and Tucker's joviality, feeling so genuine that the East meets West drops involved into characters who have something real at stake and who are also having fun, so much so that the bloopers for Rush Hour and its sequel have been viewed 19 million times. There are dollops of sexism throughout, and Ratner has faced horrifying assault allegations since issues fronting thoughtful checks and Inception. But as we reach the final showdown at an art exhibit hosted by the Council, Rush Hour delivers to me with a feel-good movie show simplification of the world in a way that brings delight, specifically that makes it feel real, scene that stick around in your mind for good. When Lee and Carter scope out Fu Chu restaurant one of Zhang's bases, Carter plays Edwin Starr's War in the car. It's strangely comforting when Lee sings War Good God. With only 10 days to go before the end of our Christmas challenge, we have reached film 15, which was another Jackie Chan film called Rush Hour. The film is about a loyal and dedicated Hong Kong inspector who teams up with a reckless and loudmouthed LAPD detective to rescue the Chinese consul's kidnapped daughter. While trying to arrest a dangerous crime lord along the way, the review has been given a 5-star rating because our favorite actor in this film were Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker. After you have watched this film, we suggest you stay until the credit roll down because there are some funny bloopers that will get you laughing. Thank you. So, I absolutely enjoyed watching this film. Jackie Chan has played his role very well, especially in the Kung Fu scenes, and Chris Tucker absolutely killed it with his performance because he made me laugh so much. Each week in November, the Deadshot crew in participant Alpha took at cinema's deafening buddy cop movies this week. Andrew Newman and David Lobris get caught up the Rush Hour. Nibu and I were assigned one of the most memorable films of 1998, Rush Hour. First off, I think this is probably the movie that introduced me to Jackie Chan as a kid, even if he was already a pretty well established actor. I remember renting this from Blockbuster movie. I really liked Lethal Weapon and this looked similar. It's funny that you mentioned that because that's exactly what this film brought to mind for me. I rented it a few years later than that, but it brings me right back to scoring the assist at my local Blockbuster for a fun film to watch with my dad over the weekend. The movie has a pretty simple setup. A Chinese diplomat's daughter gets cap turned and he sends his best man Lee Jackie Chan to find her. He gets paired up with an LA detective named Carter who earned the case after nearly blowing up the suspect and potentially getting two fellow officers killed. There is no earthly reason why Carter would got assigned, but this hilariously hit us anyway. The scene I got was because the LAPD knew it was a crap assignment and wanted to punish him for being a loose cannon who play by his own rules. The IMD summary for the film is just two cops team up to get back a kidnapped daughter, and I'm like, well, yeah, but about covers it. This movie is definitely like a more comedic version of 48 Hours when Chan is a fish out of water, good cop paired up with a Tucker's loud, brash bad cop. Speaking of comedy, does this movie Hummer hold up? I feel like there's a ton of laughs in some place, but most of the race-related humor is especially dated. Carter now becomes across as a huge jerk compared to Lee, especially early on in the film. Some of the humor is universal and will always hold up. Both Jane and Tucker have impeccable comic timing. Tucker's funny guy just to look at, and he clearly knows it. One of the best humors in the banter between the characters. Buddy cop films live and die on chemistry, and there's a reason Chan and Tucker made two more of these films. Oh yeah, absolutely, it's fun to take on Brett Ratner for being kind of an awful director, but this Rush Hour franchise is a worthy addition to pop culture, especially the first film. I like Ratner's very diverse take on LA, which just is not all white segments in suits and police uniforms. It's a bit of a sidebar, but you raised a good point. I know 90s nostalgia is pretty hacky at this point, but I distinctly remember 90s TV shows and films being more diverse than they are now and visible so. This drama's horror is the film definitely comes from the music related jokes.
I love Carter telling Lee never to touch a black man's radio. The Edward Star War Sing Alone still stands and all-time incredible character moment. I absolutely adore the short kid of Zhang singing Mare Carey's fancy in the car before she gets kidnapped. Due to Carter blowing up a car and then dancing to a few bars of Jackson's, another part of me seemingly out of nowhere. Rush Hour has a cartoonish approach to the crime genre that really makes it feel less serious and more fun. The war, but it's one of these iconic movie moments that feels like it will be lost to time a bit, which is sad because it's a great character moment for Carter and Lee. The humor that holds up the worst for me is especially the racial humor character additions. While I would not exactly call it cringeworthy or even that mean-spirited, it certainly feels dated. All the Chinese food jokes toward Lee just feel hacky. Carter bringing Lee to Grauman's Chinese theater is a hilarious moment at first, because Carter is probably being a bit serious and just not getting it. Him throwing in that line about maybe finding one of his cousins feel unnecessary. Yeah, absolutely, and it even gets directed at Asian extras in the cast to the point of feeling a little tired. But watching Jackie Chan do martial art moves while Chris Tucker dances is one of the high points of his films, and always the part I remember most after revisiting. I keep thinking about critic Dan Chushin of the New York who called Chan a weaponized Chan Kelly, and I have never heard anything more accurate. I will always marvel at Chan's martial artistry. He famously does most of his own stunts, and as a result, there always a sense of real danger in the films. His ability to do these complex, high-risk moves adds a genuine sense of drama and anxiety to everything he has ever done. Heights and I don't get along, so watching Chad jump down for several actual stories down and staggering refers made me want a case of terms. Martial artistry is a big tent with a lot of style, so it's difficult to generalize, but most films and TV shows that feature martial arts act like it's mostly offense and attacking at the right time. In reality, many of the more common martial arts styles are largely defensive in nature and focus on using your opponent's weight and momentum against them. Chan communicates this beautifully in his fight scene. He does not brutalize his opponents, he finds creative ways to disarm and immobilize them. What did you think about the villains in the film? I kept getting distracted by Kane Loach and Zhang because he is also Miles from Lost. I also thought it was kinda funny that Tom Wilkinson was essentially playing the Mandarin from Iron Man 3 with the reveal of him being Jonathan. Oh damn, that is jingle accurate even if he is actually a component rather than a puppet. I did enjoy his reveal, the held up on its until the end of the second act, and seeing him in the slow pan kind of shocks you back into the film. I didn't have to happen per se, but it raised the stakes. Yeah, I almost wonder if the reveal is involvement too early. However, if they had waited until a reveal at the end, it would have been glitch, although that doesn't stop a whole lot of blockbuster even these days. Yeah, I'm generally not a fan of films they do that without dropping a lot of hints fast, and Rush Hour is not exactly a place for subtlety. I'd say the villain was revealed at about the right time, plus it led to some dramatic irony later which he showed up at console and suggested to give the money. It was given a decent motive and all the means and opportunity in the world, and I can live with it. Vincent does a good job for looking slightly menacing in those FBI scenes. Honestly, I wish this movie had more Tom Wilkinson. We spent quite a bit of time with Sang and he is offered pretty quickly in the climax. Speaking of Sam, I think my favorite part of this film franchise is that it gets its letter for a completely throwaway line of a throwaway goon. I think about that a lot, although there's a precious little driving in the film. Most of the chases are on foot, and even the vehicle chases are short and still usually involved at least one party on the ground. It's a dinking little line set by a villain for no real reasons during the only traffic jam in the whole film, yet it works. You know who I wish got a more expanded role in the movie? Elizabeth being a bomb squad character. She kinda get introduced as a fool and possible love interest for Carter, but then disappears halfway through the movie only to come back as a plot device to deactivate the bomb waste. Yeah, there was a distinct sense that maybe in an earlier version of the script they got together, but it was patched out. She is solid whenever she is on screen, but doesn't get much screen time in the first place. Also, not a huge fan of the fact that we only see her screw up a bomb in training once and watch her cut the wire correctly by making a Lucy guess. Yeah, the old eeny meeny moy tricky always seems to work in movies. Expect in the hard liquor, but that's another story. So anyway, back to the narrative of the film. After causing a cultural misunderstanding with a certain Russian start at a local watering hole, Lee gets handcuffed to a car by Carter. Lee then escapes and breaks into the FBI safe house, basically one-handed, where he is mistaken for the kidnapper. Rush Hour is certainly a movie about miscommunication, but seriously, Lee beats the crap out of so many FBI agents before the diplomat explains the situation. Where is the actual protocol here? Although the FBI being largely implanted is one of the best running gags in the film and sadly very relevant if you followed the election. Yeah, I love how an unarmed man shows up at a consulate and their first thought is let's point our gun at him. That brings up a great point. Does Lee ever use a gun in the film? I wanna say that he never does, even thought I know he carries one. The closest we got, I think, was that scene at the beginning where he fired the gun at several people but seemingly cannot bring himself to fire his weapon. Every time he finds himself in possession of a gun in America, he seemingly tries to destroy it. He breaks down the FBI agent's guns to its basic components, and when he grabs onto Zhang, he mostly deploys around into the air. He is never given much of a reason for it, but Lee is sure to be vastly uncomfortable when dealing guns, and it works because Zhang is supremely underrated as an actor. I really just love the idea of the cop that rejects gun violence in this day and age. After Carter catches up to Lee, the FBI are set up with a false ransom and that grown up with a bomb because once again impotence. Carter and Lee are kinda blamed for it, but it ends up in a lead to a restaurant in Chinatown where Carter attempts to order some weird stuff in order to meet the mysterious Juntao. I feel like Carter saying that the eel was good but could use some hot sauce sums up their dynamic pretty well. This movie actually has a political bent in the background that is not as relevant now. The film takes place on the last day of British sovereignty when the UK released Hong Kong as a treaty in 1997. This explains why Griffin Janetto, a old white British impulse who is an avid collector of Chinese art, leading directly to the climax in an art museum which undoubtedly has lots of stolen historical artifacts. Jonathan's motive has a bit of a colonial bent where he thinks that just because he obtained something means that he has the right to it. I like how they largely seems like they were going to set the final confrontation up to a big property destroying massacre when in reality the property damage was pretty minimal save for two solid gags. We have not talked about Su Jong a lot, but I like how capable she is. She even gives Zhang a hard time capturing her and plays along with Carter distracting plan pretty well. Kids in action movies can be pretty annoying at times, but I never really found her to be in that category. I like how they established her as a student of Lee's, which let her have a little moment when being captured. Normally, watching a small child friend of attackers is strange in films, but they made this plausible. Her calling Sphinx's bluff by yelling for him to press the trigger was pretty awesome. The actresses who played so never appeared in another feature film after this. So basically, the movie ends with the guard saves the villains, killed Carter and Lee get a trip to Hong Kong, which sounds like an attempt at setting up a sequel, but they never even leave Los Angeles in the second one. I know they brought back Zhang for the third one, but it was not the same actresses. Any final thought on the film? I'd like to take a moment to highlight the My Daddy Can Beat Up Your Daddy X Chang Lee and Carter had. John nearly forget to mention Carter's dad. His one moment of clarity comes from him not making peace with how his father dies and explain why he is ambivalent about having a partner. Also, the phrase, "Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?" will follow Chris Tucker to his grave. It's the clip news organization will invariably show when he dies, and they need a tribute piece of him ready. I do remember people quoting his movie a lot when it came out. Tucker doesn't have a lot of film roles, but almost all of them are completely memorable. One of the most surprising part of this film is that Tucker didn't have much of the film career before this and seemingly has less of one since maybe he prefers to focus on stand-up, but there is something sad about someone so profoundly talented having so few roles. Rush Hours is undoubtedly dated, but the killer's chemistry between Chan and Tucker will always hold up. While it might not be as quotable as it used to be, it's still a perfectly enjoyable film that's just as comfortable being goppy as it is kicking. Rush Hour 1998, directed by Brett Ratner, one of the Hollywood's most successful directors, stars Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker. It achieved commercial success and became the seventh top-grossing film of 1998. The plot of the film centers on the kidnapping of the daughter of the Chinese consul. Inspector Lee, played by Jackie Chan, is called to assist in the investigation because it is believed that the mysterious crime lord Jonathan is behind the kidnapping. Lee finds himself paired with Detective James Carter of the Los Angeles Police Department, played by Chris Tucker. They gradually learn to work together and are able to reunite the family as well as discover the identity of Jonathan. Rush Hour disrupts Hollywood's racial heresy by removing white culture and focusing on Asian American and African American culture. Rush Hour, directed by Brett Ratner, one of Hollywood's most successful directors, stars Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker. It achieved commercial success and became the seventh top-grossing film of 1998. The plot of the film centers on the kidnapping of the daughter of the Chinese consul. Inspector Lee, played by Jackie Chan, is called to assist in the investigation because it is believed that the mysterious crime lord Jonathan is behind the kidnapping. Lee finds himself paired with Detective James Carter of the Los Angeles Police Department, played by Chris Tucker. They gradually learn to work together and are able to reunite their family as well as discover the identity of Juntao. Rush Hour disrupts Hollywood racial heresy by removing white culture and focusing on Asian American and African American culture. The film is able to break down the boundaries between races and change heresies about the enjoyment of numerous racial ideologies that are integrated within the dialogue and scenes. Prove that the joke influenced the audience to ratify their own racial beliefs. The film gained positive reviews about Tucker's comedic performance and how Chan and Tucker work very well together. This fact supports my thesis of how Rocco-based humor neutralizes racial difference, so the audience is more likely to focus on the true aspects of stereotype rather than challenge the exaggerated portrayal. The positive reception proves that there is a paradox between racist representations and widespread approval and acceptance. The movie targets teenagers and adults because they have personalization about different racial groups. Without this reception, the film would not be able to garner laughter but rather offenses. Rush Hour 2, directed by Brett Ratner, one of Hollywood's most successful directors, stars Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker. It receives high box office review and is considered one of the highest grossing martial art films of all time. This sequel is the 1998 film Rush Hour, followed Inspector Lee, played by Chan, and Los Angeles Police Detective James Carter, played by Tucker, and the adventures that they have. Carter is on vacation visiting Lee in Hong Kong, but they soon find themselves implicated in a scandal that involves counterfeit money, which brings them from Hong Kong to Los Angeles and then finally to Las Vegas. Although this movie is a comedic action film, it challenges typical Hollywood films by starring two minorities. While minorities have traditionally been casted in the roles of a sidekick or villain, Chan and Tucker are the main protagonists. By challenging the popular notion that the leading role features are individual from the dominant white race, Rush Hour 2 possesses the possibility of a cross-racial bonding between an Asian and an African American. Jane and Tucker both embody the stereotype of their particular race. Chan is a serious Asian man yet extremely skilled in Kung Fu, while Tucker is a tall African American who acts childish and seems very impulsive. To the everyday viewer, this movie serves as an entertaining comedy, but for such representation of race to be harmless, the audience must unconsciously accept or believe the stereotypes to be somewhat true, thus supporting my thesis that besides entertainment, the movie proves that race is comedy generalized and influence people to accept racially defined characteristics. The movie targets teenager and adult because it implies that a previous understanding of stereotype is needed for the joke to take sense and have their intended response, which is laughter. This scholarly article written by Sharmi, professor at Sigmund State University who specialized in Asian American Studies and East-West Comparative Studies, documents the start of the phenomenon of pairing an Asian martial arts with an African American comedian may provide the historical context to movies such as the Rush Hour series, which combines giallo kung fu and giallo black jokes. He begins by noting that the genre of kung fu was introduced to the West by Bruce Lee, although there was no nonsense on black jokes in earlier kung fu films that started Lee. The Last Dragon marks the development of racial depictions. In this film, a young African American boy meditates and wears the stereotypical Chinese dress. The Asian American, on the other hand, take on black dialect and body rhythm, may consider the joining of giallo kung fu and black jokes a marriage of convenience for box office profit in which the public sports ill calibration. Films such as Rush Hour contain jokes that includes the common prevailing notation of Asians and blacks in American mass media, which would render giallo gialloer and black blacker. However, this sad couple is belong to each other, crafting a racial hybridity. Rush Hour focuses on the relationship between the Asian and African American stars. Therefore, the film offers the likelihood of cross-racial identification. The article provides film theorists and scholars with new understanding of race-based comedy. May's writing reinforces my hypothesis of the buddy cop genre has a history of interracial partnership where race is expertly shown. Thus, besides validating racial differences, such performances further hybridize today's multicultural society. This expository piece, written by Leilani Nashmi, assistant professor in the Department of Communication at the University of Washington, who specialized in multiracial and interracial studies, Asian American media representation, and Asian American subcultural production, analyzed the history of Asian, African, and American relationship. The chapter explains how Rush Hour breaks the general convictions of a buddy cop film and defies the norms of Hollywood film and gender character stereotype. She utilized the film Rush Hour as an example of its portrayal of race relationship with its removal of the white male character by including John as well as Tucker. The film appeals to a wider range of audience. The purpose is primarily to inform, but it also encourages the reader to examine certain films for comedic relief as well as social and cultural commentary. Rush Hour is a comedy yet it helps the audience to notice the concept of racial power. In most buddy cop films, there is always someone in control and someone who is simply the follower. The white male will never be the buddy, but with Jan and Tucker, they are almost equals. Nashmi is most likely targeting Asian Americans because of her and Asian American America is characterized by both African American and Euro American society. Rush Hour offers a vision of cross-racial identification and the idea of hybrid identities, for there is a convergence of culture in music and film. This builds upon my thesis in this besides an acceptance of racially defined differences, race-based humor can provide a possible changing of racial hierarchy and the questioning of racial tolerance. Such a composition is more geared towards academia instead of generic attention from the general public because it provides background information about Asian black relationship, implies elevated language and creates a possibility of a future state of relations. This research article written by Ji Hon Park, assistant professor in communication at Hope College who specialized in Asian stereotypes in the media, analyzed the ideological implication of racial stereotyping. The article, which is a result of sociology study, explains that through minorities are staring in more mainstream films, a racial hierarchy is still evident. The study included a focus group of whites, black, and Asian in order to analyze subtle reactions and response to the film's implicit stereotypes. Minorities continues to inhabit negative stereotype, but the contradiction that arises in that these stereotypical portrayals have commercial viability. Rush Hour 2 is an example of its incongruity between racism in comedy and widespread popularity. Park discusses how the genre of comedy allows for its audience to make an interpretation of racial jokes as harmless, for stereotypes are an important element of comedy in that they help establish specific character classification that are based on some truth that has been extricated. This supports my thesis because I contended that race-based humor influences the audience to not challenge the established assumption of race. A study supports this belief since the focus group was able to laugh throughout the entire movie. Most participants did not find the humor personally offensive, but they acknowledged that the racial humor has the possibility of becoming prejudiced. In comedy, Park notes that a joke is conceived of a racist based on whether a minority is telling it or a white person. Another aspect that creates success for the film is that all races are objects of mockery, and Bjork's Park's conclusion is that racial stereotypes are problematic because realism in the media encourages viewers to incorporate on screen attitudes and beliefs into the real world. The purpose is primarily to inform since the study examines how race is confined within the dialogue. Racial ideology is also embedded in Jackie Chan performance for the racial myth of an Asian man who excels in Kung Fu but is cultural ignorant, as well as Chris Tucker personifying a coon. Furthermore, with the study, it becomes clear that the comedic portrayal of racial traits encourages participants to see the small truth in racial stereotypes rather than dispute these distortions. It does permit the audience to consider that when viewing a comedy, critical analysis is usually absent, and this can lead to believe that racial differences are natural and not culturally created. Park it targeting teenagers and adults because they are able to apply actuality to racial theme and hence find amusement in the satirical portrayal of race. The anticipated audience could also include scholars since this composition was published in the Journal of Communication, and scholars will be more interested in learning about the response of black, white, and Asian viewers and how they make sense of racial differences. Rush Hour, a safe, solid joy. Newsflash: Rush Hour is a good movie. I think that almost goes without saying. 24 years after its theatrical release, the movie remains an absolute delight to watch, regardless of whether or not you had grown up with it or not.
Rush Hour 1998 follows an investigation led by Detective Lee, played by Jackie Chan, and Carter Chris Tucker to find and save the Chinese console Han's daughter, Zhang, after she has been kidnapped by a crime lord. But if I am being honest, that's not really the point of the Brett Ratner directed comedy. I admit it's certainly the plot of the movie, but it's not why people continue to quote it to this day. At the center of Rush Hour is an untable chemistry between its two leads that is an absolute delight to watch. Chan and Tucker don't so much coexist on screen together as they continually try to one up each other using their respective strengths as performers. Tucker's performance is built around an impulsive and often loud personality, while Chance provides the Arabic skills and kind-hearted characteristics that he is known for. What results from is an extremely balanced buddy cop pairing that stands out due to their contrast despite how crowded the buddy cop genre is as a whole. And frankly, that's why this movie works as well as it does. The plot is mostly serviceable and makes enough sense, but it's really just there to provide our characters with the set pieces that they need to entertain us, and it shows there's a sense of familiarity to the film's many beats, but because they are often punctuated with fantastic stunt work from Chain or some genuinely hilarious and well-timed comedy from Tucker, it simply works. Rush Hour is just a fun movie, and honestly that's all it needs to be. It knows what it needs to be, how to be, and it ended up spanning two successful sequels using the same basic formula as this first film. It may also be getting a fourth installment assuming it ever gets out of development hell, and even smart a one season long TV adaptation a few years ago, but well, that's the story for another day. The 1993 Rachel Linkstrander film is an absolute classic as far as both of the 90s independent films and coming of gender are concerned. Rush Hour 1998 action comedy movie star that stars Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker as an Inspector Lee and James Carter as they raced against time to try and save a 8 years old girl from criminals. Now, believe it or not, it actually never been this movie before, so I had no idea what a roller coaster I was in. But once I watched the entire thing, I was shocked and amazed. The actors are good, the comedy is fun, the action is awesome, but the main thing that stood out for me was the duo Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker. This duo was speechless. Jackie Chan action is comedy and Chris Tucker fast tracker comedy was amazing to watch. Watching these two in scene was like eating two pancakes. Watching them interact with each other was amazing. Watching them say funny stuff was amazing. Literally every scene with them was amazing. That doesn't mean this movie doesn't have flaws. The storyline is a bit basic and it's a very old film. It was made in 1998. We are in 2017, but don't let that stop you from saying this Hollywood movie is awesome classic. I guess this movie a 10 out of 10, a masterpiece but outdated. Rush Hour 1998, when the crimes lord
kidnap the daughter of the Khan's consul Han, and unknown group of terrorists capture his little daughter Zhang for a large sum of money. Han makes a request to the FBI to fly in his own men to help Detective Inspector Lee. Jackie Chan, the FBI wants to keep the investigation to themselves without Lee's assistance, so they get reckless fast, targeting LAPD officer James Carter.